talk.
Yeah.
It's just so weird. Like they win the championship and they're obsessed with being little brother. Like this is an all-time era for MSU, and still like just it should be beneath them. But whatever, that they did win the title, Idaho didn't. So there you go.
It is 2026, and we're already off to a roaring Tubbs start here. Guys, it's good to be back. We're Tubbs at the Club, the Idaho Vandals affiliate on the Big Sky Podcast Network. I am your host, Dallas Hammer, joined by Brian Marceau.
Good to be back, guys. We've got an ocean of stuff to dive through today, which is the downside of taking 2 weeks off.
And everybody's favorite producer, it's silly Goose himself, Martin the Brick Wall Heemstra. Martin, how's it going, man?
Going good. It's nice to have you back after 2 weeks off, and excited to talk about some Vandal football news.
Yeah, this is going to be a packed show, guys. So what we did specifically for you is cut down on our ad reads just to get more content in here. So we're just going to rip this off. It's Around the Bar, brought to us by Hughes River Expeditions. Guys, the last time we appeared live on your screens or podcast airwaves or whatever you might be listening to us or consuming us through, last time we spoke to you, Court Dennison had just recently left the Idaho Vandals to go off to Oregon State to become their co-defensive coordinator. He unfortunately has taken Dylan Lane with him. We will get to transfer news later on in this month, as again, the transfer portal is open until Friday, January 16th. So we will recap that later on. This is not going to be a show covering too much of the transfer stuff, but the biggest news, guys, in Vandal land right now is new defensive coordinator Lee Stalker coming to us from Iowa State. Who wants to go first? Who is excited about being able to stalk our opponents this year?
Well, that might not be new, right? So I got to tell you, I've obviously done some research on Lee Stalker, in this process. And if you're the type of person who liked that Jason Eck during his 3 years often had important positional coaches or coordinators who came from the Midwest. You should be a fan of this hire. If you're a person who likes that, look, I mean, Thomas Ford has a lot of guys with some diverse backgrounds, but I'd say compared to some other staffs, he has quite a few guys who've worked their way up, from lower level colleges. I'm talking about like, hey, Neil Fendel. I mean, that matches Thomas Ford's background as well. Lee Stalker definitely worked his way up from lower levels too, but most recently at Iowa State, Power 4. That's the theoretical recruitment footprint is different. But so we also have a press conference to talk about. We'll get to that in a second, because different from Ian Shoemaker, Lee Stalker we don't have firsthand experience playing against teams Lee Stalker called defensive plays for. So what are we looking at first? Well, Stalker's background is, again, he's been kind of all over the place. He played college football. He's a linebacker at Kent State. He got into coaching back in 2012, started out as an assistant coach at Butler High School, and has moved his way up since. Some key stops in my mind from 2014, 2018. He is a special teams coordinator and D-line coach at Tiffin University. That's a D2 school. From 2019 to 2020, now this was only one actual played year because COVID happened. Lee Stalker was the DC at Valdosta State, and his defense at Valdosta State was absolutely great. Gave up 18 points a game, allowed just over 204 yards per game in that time, but he only got a call plays for 1 year because COVID happened, turned the world upside down. He goes from Valdosta State to being the outside linebackers coach at his alma mater, Kent State, and then eventually became just the linebackers coach, and was there for 2 years. And then from 2023 to 2025, he's been at Iowa State in differing roles. Started out as director of player personnel, was an assistant linebackers coach and an assistant D-line coach as well prior to coming to Idaho. Of note here, Stalker, coaching under Matt Campbell at Iowa State. These are some of the most recent best teams Iowa State has had in a long time. So that's the background, Dallas. To me, look, if you haven't watched that press conference, you got to watch the press conference, because that's where you're going to learn the most about it. Because full disclosure, I'm going to let Dallas talk a little bit more. I'm ready to run through a brick wall for Lee Stalker after hearing him at the PC. But Dallas, that's his background. Throwing the wheel over to you. I guess your thoughts on Stalker as the new DC.
Yeah, I mean, guys, I really, 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 really highly encourage you, go to the Vandal Athletics YouTube page. Go take a listen to the press conference. Moreira and Pribble are both there as well to start the press conference, and in the back half is Stalker and Shoemaker. So for those that are super tuned into the football team, man, this is like appointment viewing right here. Stalker started off the press conference by just coming in and immediately saying, these are my three focuses: teach, motivate, and lead. And he defined them with teaching process of success, motivate the guys to be their best daily self, and lead them with great character and intelligence. And then then it starts opening up to where people are asking him questions, and he starts saying some things like, we're going to focus on fundamentals, we're going to play fast. A lot of the stuff that coaches really almost always say, pretty just milk toast first 5 minutes. Like, yeah, okay, good, this is exactly what I wanted, but there's nothing that's blowing me apart here. Until we got to the 2024 question. Somebody asked him, I think it was Trevor Junt. I apologize if it wasn't. I don't remember who it was at this point. Asked him, hey, 2024 Idaho had a top 3 defense in the Big Sky when it came to almost every metric. What are you going to do? Your defense is going to be multiple, and he talked very much about how it's going to be multiple. There's going to be 3-man fronts, 4-man fronts, etc. But he said specifically, man, this is a system of defense that they're going to put in to give guys in game answers and solutions to things, and it'd be very player centric. Thinks guys are going to see the why of why they're going to run this defense. They want to take what worked really well last year. Overall, the actual conversion rates on 3rd and 4th down were pretty good. I know that we all watched that season and maybe felt some pain on every single time that there was a 3rd and long that was converted for 20 yards. But those are things, for the most part, that they can build off of and then fix those weaknesses of, hey, couldn't get pressure on the quarterback last year, and it felt like anytime the Vandal defense was in a 2-minute situation, they got pretty shredded. So he spoke very much about how he's not going to force guys into, I'm bringing in a 3-4 or a 3-3-5. He mentioned, at Iowa State, yeah, they're pretty famous for that 3-3-5, but at Kent State and when he was the coordinator at Valdosta State, did a lot of 3-4, 4-3, even had some 4-2-5. Really, it's not about a base package that they're bringing in. It's about concepts and terms and verbiage and clarity that are going to be clear across everything, so that it shrinks the playbook into being a lot smaller, but very similar calls to replicate being a complex defense, which I think was pretty apparent from Court Dennison's defense. We talked very much last year about how excited we were that it was, man, he's got all these different looks and it's gonna be so multiple and so crazy. And it worked really well at times, but then there were also times, Brian, that we saw guys just could not execute. It was there were times where it felt like half the field didn't know what they were doing. Stalker came in specifically saying, we're not going to do that. We are going to make this as simple and short for guys so that they know that their call is going to be pretty consistent across whatever type of defense alignment we're running. The DBs are going to know what they're doing. The linebackers are going to know what they're doing. The D-line is going to know what they're doing. And it's going to be a pretty similar call for them, so they don't have to go through the Rolodex in the brain to figure out what play they're running.
Yeah, he also talked specifically about Idaho needing to be better at getting to the quarterback, which I think that was probably music to a lot of people's ears. I guess the other thing with just with how he taught, and this is kind of interesting overlap between both Lee Stalker and Ian Shoemaker when they both spoke at the introductory press conference. Thematically, they seem to be on the same page in a way that I would say Linehan and Dennison last year were not. Both Stalker and Shoemaker talked a lot about teaching. They talked a lot about systems, not just having a play call, but having systems, having answers. Of course, Shoemaker's focus was having answers to things like pressure. Stalker, of course, a separate answer as well. But it's just the offseason. We know that a press conference in January doesn't win you any games in August or September, October, November. But I left after listening to both those guys speak, and I'm focusing a little bit more on Stalker because, look, we had an entire episode being ecstatic about Ian Shoemaker because we have actual background with seeing the fruits of an Ian Shoemaker offense for multiple years. So there's reason to be confident there. Stalker, if you weren't involved in the interviews with head coach Thomas Ford, you have no reason to really know a ton other than to say, like, well, I mean, look, it was a pretty exhaustive process to hire both the DC and OC of Zoom interviews, plus bringing guys to campus to make sure that, the in-person vibe matched the online vibe as well. And to just get a real good feel for it. Because my takeaway has been this offseason, it feels like Thomas Ford is treating this offseason like it matters a ton. And that in Ford's mind, there's a lot of stuff from year one that he wants to change. And Lee Stalker also brought up part of why he came to Moscow is he loved the passion that Thomas Ford had. He felt that matched his. And, he talked about himself, Stalker, being a thorough guy, and that Ford was a very thorough guy in, his experience working with him. So look, we're obviously going to see some, things as we don't have a complete roster to even project anything at this point. But I can tell you, like, just gut reaction to listening to Stalker speak is this guy seemed like he has command. In some ways he came across as a more polished Rob Orich. Now that's just on the microphone, right? Rob Orich is kicking ass better than just about anyone in the nation right now as a DC. So I don't mean to set that as the benchmark, but I know that I stopped listening to that press conference, and I knew, to me, immediately I landed on, like, I like this hire. I feel Ford obviously put a ton of work into this, and this wasn't this was a thing where I stopped listening. I thought, man, I'm comfortable. Let's see who the players we have. But am I anxious at all? No, I completely understand how this guy hit a home run in interviews.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, the first 5 minutes were pretty, like, typical of what you hear from a coach in just about every press conference. And then, man, absolute A+ from me. I could not be more thrilled with this hire after listening to that press conference. A couple other things I wanted to quickly just touch on, Brian. I loved hearing this is going to be his second time as a defensive coordinator. Somebody asked him like, "Hey, what did you learn from, it's been not a decade, but essentially let's round it. A decade ago you were a defensive coordinator, and then you've been in the FBS for so long. Like, what did you learn doing this?" And he mentioned Sean Lewis, Matt Campbell, and John Haycock, the coaches that he's worked for at Kent State and at Iowa State, and mentioned just learning game planning and approaching your opponent completely differently than the way he'd learned it at lower levels of football. Not to say that there's not good coaches in the D2 level and as you work your way up, but there's something different about learning defense for a handful of years against the guy who's now coaching at Penn State, one of the probably 10 best college football jobs in the country. So really thrilled to hear that. And then he mentioned specifically the way he goes about game planning and preparing for an opponent lines up with exactly what Ford wants to do, being ready on Saturdays, but also understanding like, hey, this is a program that has had injury issues like a motherfucker for at least 15 years. I mean, most teams do, but you also got to be ready in December. Like, yeah, you got to be ready for those games on Saturday, but you also got to make sure that you're putting your guys in a position that they're going to be healthy and still surviving in December. I also really, really liked, he was asked Brian about the difference between FCS and FBS, and he said there is none. You as a coach, you run into the same thing. There's two problems you have to solve: ability conflicts and run pass conflicts. And ability conflicts are obviously, well, shit, that receiver is 3 steps faster than our fastest corner. That's going to be a problem. And then obviously the how do you scheme against the run and the pass? But he mentioned specifically, in his system of defense, the coach solves the answer first. The culture comes first, then the players, and the scheme is last. They will always do what the players do best. Sure, the coach is going to have his own built-in beliefs and his situational awareness and intelligence from years and years and decades of coaching, but ultimately the defense is going to be about what the players do best, and it's all about teaching them how to do what they do best. So couldn't be more happy about this, Brian.
That was another way where Shoemaker and Stalker just seemed completely to overlap of. So, I mean, like, so I want to talk on the Shoemaker portion of the press conference too. Cause that press conference, it was really cool to get both those guys in and have them go back to back. It was nice to have two guys who, when that press conference ended, I could completely understand 3 years from now, one or both of those guys being head coaches elsewhere if they wanted to. Like, that was the type of command those guys had. Shoemaker talked about using multiple fronts because he was asked questions too about, coaching at Eastern. And hey, you listeners who paid attention to our Shoemaker episode, you already know. Yeah, Shoemaker has been about balance. That's kind of been his thing where he's been wherever he's been. But it also varies a little bit year to year based off the talent. Shoemaker spent a good amount of time talking about everyone in the Big Sky associates him with coaching Eric Berrier, one of the best quarterbacks in the history of the Big Sky Conference. But he spent a lot of time talking about multiplicity, having multiple formations. He spent a lot of time talking about how to him, he knows Ford has been open about wanting to run the football, and a lot of the most successful Big Sky teams have been run first teams in the last, 3-4 years in the Big Sky. And Shoemaker talked about that being obviously a point of emphasis, but for him, what he cares is that opposing defenses have to guard every square inch of the field. So, he talked about, hey, obviously, we're going to pound the A gap and make teams stop us there. But that's part of how you get teams to start loading up the box. You spread them out. You can hit them on the perimeter. You hit them over the top. To the way that Shoemaker represented what he wants to do offensively is similar to Stalker. It's, you got to play to the strengths of your team. And you also have to take what the defense has given you, and putting pressure on defenses. If you've listened to any of the interviews Shoemaker has done previously, which you can find quite a few on YouTube, his verbiage focuses a lot on speed of decision-making, speed of actually getting guys up to line and calling plays to put more pressure on the defense. But also not just having a play. The offense is a system where there are answers within his playbook, within how he calls plays. He wants to give players answers to pressure, not just a play that you go and execute, which that to me is kind of I completely understand how Ford felt as high on Shoemaker as he clearly did to offer him the job. And this is part of why I was ecstatic about Shoemaker too, is, talking about approaching the offense, not as, hey, this is the way we do things. We're going to go and now we're going to just go do it. It's adapting both to the team you're playing and to the guys you have in the moment. So yeah, Dallas, I don't know if there's anything you want to talk about further on Stalker or hit Shoemaker, but it was flooring to me after that, just how I left. Again, we're sitting on a 4-8 season, right, Dallas?
Yeah.
And we don't even have a roster for Idaho yet. But I left that with that press conference with both those guys talking, thinking, I think, look, Ford's doing every damn thing I could possibly want him to, or that everything I think a fan could want Ford to do in this offseason, he has. Look, we got a OC who's beat the shit out of a ton of teams when play calling was an issue the year before. And look, we lose Dennison moving up. That's not bad news to have a guy move up. But the guy who's coming in to replace Dennison without, making reference in a negative way, essentially head on talks about what the fans saw as shortcomings of Idaho's defense and talked about those being points of emphasis. So, as far as grading the offseason for Thomas Ford, man, to me, that's an A+ as of January 6th.
Yeah. Bold to mention January 6th on the show, Brian. If we look at just the last couple notes I had from Lee Stalker, I did want to just quickly point out, he mentioned his job his goal has been to get back to being a coordinator over the last year or two. Ford sealed him on Moscow. He has obviously not a ton of familiarity with Moscow or the area, but has a bunch of professional cohorts and colleagues and friends that have coached at Idaho or around Idaho, had nothing but good things to say. And he spoke multiple times about his expectation for guys, not the typical attitude and effort is a big one, but valuing the opportunity to be a Vandal. Like, man, sold A+, couldn't have been more excited. And then Ian Shoemaker steps up to the fucking podium, and Brian, I would give. Well, my wife would probably divorce me, but I would give just about anything to just be on this coaching staff and just sit following Shoemaker around for the rest of the year, following Ford around for the rest of the year. Like, I could not have been more thrilled about the things he said. He came in and immediately said, hey, I've known Thomas Ford for over a decade. We coached against each other back in when they were D2 head coaches at Simon Fraser and Central Washington. His passion for Idaho is what sold him on coming back here. And then he immediately jumps into saying Idaho is known as the quarterback U of the Pacific Northwest, and mentioned John Freeze and Doug Nussmeier and Kenny Hobart and then the Linehans and Giovanni McCoy. And he said, the quote was, my job is to continue that legacy. Great football, great offensive football, and developing quarterbacks. End quote. That is absolutely what I wanted to hear from the Vandal offensive coordinator. The understanding of hey, look, this is a place that has punched out some pretty good quarterbacks. We've got to continue doing that. And then he jumped right into Joshua Wood, has the talent to be that guy. He recruited him years ago. They're both from the same town. He's known him a long time. The goal is to be aggressive, innovative, explosive, and to what he wants his legacy to be here at Idaho is to develop a quarterback to pick up that legendary Vandal lineage. And man, I Crewhead 76 in the comments, Shoe knowing some Vandal history was a nice touch. Shoe's comments on how to use Wood were great. Again, guys, I highly encourage you to go listen to this interview, because I could go through and read off point for point every single thing Shoemaker said, Brian. I have a couple that I want to hit, but I'll leave you with any other final thoughts on Shoemaker before I jump back in and just take a hatchet to this episode and turn it into Dallas glossing over the Shoemaker resume.
Well, separate hatchet. One of the big connections for Lee Stalker to Idaho is Jeff Mills. Jeff Mills, quality control at Iowa State. He's a former defensive coordinator for at University of Idaho back in 2006. But my last bullet points for Shoemaker. One, he is detailed. He talked about he's been calling plays since he was 25, which is FYI, he was 25 a while ago.
Yeah.
He comes across as a guy who absolutely knows what the hell he's doing. And look, we've already talked about that by looking at his resume. He has many years of being quite successful. He won the league twice as a head coach with Central. His offenses at Eastern were top 3 in the nation. And the last 2 years at Grand Valley State had to very different sets of play calling to arrive to being, towards the top in their conference as well. Just complete change from year 1 to year 2, which if you are ever a person who's curious, like, hey, when the coaches talk about this, like, hey, it sounds great, but like, what does that actually mean? Well, when Shoemaker talked about adapting to what his play guys are, look at those Grand Valley State teams, those 2 years. It goes from rushing 67% of the time year 1 to about a 50-50 split year 2. That's clearly adapting to the talents and picking up W's in the process. Shoemaker spent a lot of time talking about Joshua Wood, because also a lot of the questions were about Joshua Wood.
Yep.
And it was really interesting to hear him talk about, it's important what Shoemaker tries to do with his players is one, he runs, I know the educational term for this, so I need to look it up real quick. It's called an inverted classroom in the educational world. It's flipped installs when we're talking football, and that was similar to how Lee Stalker was talking about how to best use practice time when they have limited meeting times. It was very interesting from an educational perspective. That's my initial background, guys, to hear Ian Shoemaker talk about doing flipped installs, the point of that. And if you're curious, hey, what's flipped installs? What are inverted classrooms? That's where the lecture component is done independently. So, for example, going over new plays players would do that away from the player meeting. And the point then of the player meeting is for Shoemaker to assess immediately, okay, how much do these guys actually get this? And 2, the focus of the meeting is not to go over stuff that most people get. It's to identify, hey, where are we not all on the same page? And the focus is to get everyone on the same page based off what Shoemaker talked about essentially is like when you're trying to see what people know. If you lecture, like if you do traditional method for teaching plays, your end of the class portion is your quiz on how well these guys get it. In flipped installs, people walk in, they're quizzed immediately. That gives him the feedback of what do we need to focus on. In essentially every aspect of talking football, Ian Shoemaker and Lee Stalker, they are guys who are clearly focused on teaching. They clearly have their own system of teaching, and they are focused on not stubbornly making square pegs slam into round holes. Their focus is on we got to kick ass execution wise, and that's my job as a coach to get people there. So to me, it was quite reassuring to hear them both talk about that. Again, from the educational perspective, those guys clearly care a ton about the act of teaching as a coach, which matches everything we'd been told about when people watch Thomas Ford as a special teams coordinator. That 100% matched the descriptions we had there. So this is just another way where heading into year 2, it seems like the identity of the coaching staff is really in sync in January. But it's kind of flooring to me, the level it's in sync, when you compare it to what we had last year.
Yeah, Brian, and that's where this gets a little muddy for me in talking about it, because there were not overt shots at last year, and when pressed with a couple different questions, like I think it was Trevor Junt said, leadership was a problem in 2024, or excuse me, in 2025. How are you going to lead the offense differently? And he came out and said, hey, look, what happened in the past doesn't matter. I don't really care about what happened last year, but the first thing I've got to do is prove to these guys that I can make them better at football. That's how you get respect. You don't get respect by just being named the offensive coordinator or the quarterback's coach, which that felt like a bit of a shot. And then he said, then we're going to treat them fairly, because that's how you get people to trust you, by treating them consistently and fairly. And then once they, as in the players, have understood that we care about them as people more than we care about them as players. Obviously, we want them to be great players, but we care about them as people more than we care about their output on the football field. That organic process will build loyalty, and that process of guys buying in, guys trusting the coaches, guys being loyal to the coaches, that going along with those flipped installs is going to make things just speed up so much faster, because the whole goal is how fast do we get all 11 guys executing at a high level, not just the quarterback, not just some guys in the position groups, but everybody. How fast we do that is up to the kids and up to the coaches working together. But then he spoke, Brian, so many times, and this is why off air I've mentioned why I love the air raid.
He meaning Shoemaker.
Yes, thank you. Shoemaker said specifically, the offense is going to be multiple. It's a spread offense. It's very multiple, but the multiplicity is by making formations more difficult, just by compressing them or stretching them or using motion, switching from pistol to gun, making the defense read the entire field at all times and cover, as he said, every blade of artificial turf in the Kibbe Dome. But the reads that are being made by the quarterback are not crazy difficult. They're not insane. They're not widely different across all of the plays. All of the plays are going to be somewhat similar. The formations that they may come through, the personnel on the field, that might all be different, but the same concepts of the offense are going to be the same. He didn't get into what concepts those were, and I can't imagine why he'd ever say those things in a press conference, but that's the type of thing we didn't see last year, Brian. I said on this show, it felt like Idaho had a 4,000-page playbook and was just randomly like picking darts just to see what was going to happen. That is not what this offense is going to be. This offense is, he specifically mentioned the quarterbacks already have the key to the playbook. It is not the full playbook, because the full playbook won't be developed yet. They're going to take what worked from last year, what Shoe has historically leaned on, what the players they have are good at, and and they'll build something together for the 2025 offense. But the quarterbacks already have the teaching manual that is all about looking at the game from their perspective and helping them make great decisions really, really fast, because those reads will have already been concepts that they are hopefully familiar with, learning, digesting, so that when the playbook is given to them, they're already ready to go, rather than having to figure out all of the concepts. Crewhead 76 in the comment section, I loved how the coaches handled the last year questions. I did too. Like, there's no real great way to dunk on the previous staff, especially when said staff is a former Vandal legend player. But being able to come in and say, hey, don't care about last year, but also here's some issues we've heard about from last year, and here's how we're going to move ourselves towards the future. Brian, I couldn't be more thrilled about it. I have one last thing about his in-game adjustments I wanted to bring up, but I'll pass the mic back to you for one last shot.
No, it's cool.
It's cool.
Just keep going.
The other big thing with Shoemaker, guys, was the adjustments in game. And he said in the press conference, he's like, hey, Thomas Ford probably doesn't want to hear this, but halftime adjustments are overrated, is what he said. His adjusting to things in game comes from experience. Like you said, Brian, he's been calling plays since he was 25, from the NAIA level all the way up to the FBS. But having a process and not just plays is what is going to be key. He compared his offense to Navy's triple option and said, obviously it's not a triple option offense, but with the triple option, like, each play has built-in answers for whatever a defense might be doing stylistically. And it's up to the quarterback making the read to figure out which guy is going to take the ball for the best shot at success. And that's really what they're going to be doing here. It's not just okay, halftime, well, shit, we're down 3 scores and we've been running the ball. Now it's time to pass the ball. It's hey, you're going to lean into your existing play calls and your existing play sheet against what you're seeing defensively, and be prepared the correct way. If you're not, basically took a shot at coaches that are hung up on halftime adjustments and said, look, if you're making crazy amounts of halftime adjustments, you probably didn't prepare very well throughout the week. You have to be prepared so that when game day comes, you can just gently pivot around the plays that you have and lean harder into a certain concept. If a curl flat concept is dinking and dunking you down the field with perfect success rate, lean into that a little bit more rather than just start throwing shit at the wall to try to figure it out. So couldn't be more excited, Brian, for what we're going to see from the Vandal coordinateds in 2026.
Yeah, and for people curious about the other hires, there is a complete coaching staff. We're going to talk about Vijay Malo and Spencer Treadwell. It's the D-line and running backs coaches. We will talk about their backgrounds on different episodes. We will talk about transfers into the program and out of the program later, but I can give you the transfers out of the program cliff notes. Idaho has not lost a ton of contributors. Most of the guys who are leaving Idaho barely played whatsoever last year, and we're happy for their times as Vandals. But once you leave the program, you've actualized what you're going to for Idaho. And for almost everyone who's hit the transfer portal so far, their open roster spot is more valuable than the level they contributed last season. The exceptions to that are Dallas, you already talked about. Dylan Lane's in the portal, losing Caleb Ricks in the portal at DB. That one hurt. We all already know about Matthias McLean in the portal. That one hurt as well. Will Cornelson, he played starters level reps. So those 4 are the guys that I think if we could have kept those guys, hey, it's a win. But whatever, the team went 4-8. No one's irreplaceable from 4-8.
I mean, and Brian, we did lose a couple other contributors that I don't think we were necessarily too devastated to lose. Hayden John and Matt Irwin both played a bunch of safeties.
It was one of our weakest positions last year. So,
man, yeah, Hayden John is going to be an interesting story, I think, for us to discuss at the end of this transfer portal. Hopefully, things work out better for him than they certainly look to be.
Ian Shoemaker did say offensively their focus now for recruitment in the portal is essentially just pass catchers. Through their process so far, Idaho already feels comfortable with the running back room, which we talked about Kenny Golston, but there's other guys too. The O-line has stayed pretty cohesive, so Idaho's fine there. Also, we've just seen transfers to the O-line have not really given Idaho a ton of starters over the last few years. So keeping those guys itself, that's a pretty big deal. And
that's been transfers from all over. That's been transfers down from Arizona State and Wazoo, transfers up from NAIA or D2. It just has not seemed to work.
Yeah. So really the offensive focus for the portal is pass catchers, the end.
And that's what it should be realistically, right? The running back situation seems to have been solved with JUCO and freshmen. Maybe we'll see another running back in the portal. Certainly not a bad problem to have too many running backs, but he was very clear about we're pretty set at most positions. It's receiver that they need more size and speed.
Yeah. So Martin's got an update on women's basketball for us in a second, but Dallas, before we get there, we need to hear your weekly update on what the hell you're doing with. We'll get there in a moment. Long
rip.
We're it was just Crewhead got to me on that one. That one was incredible.
Okay, you read that and then I'll read that so I know how we're doing.
Crewhead 76 in the comments. Hayden's agent mailed him an LSU shirt, so the phone call from Lane Kiffin has to be coming. For anybody who doesn't know what I'm referencing, Hayden John posted to his social media a couple days ago that he's heard from, and it was like 15 FBS schools. Guys, the transfer portal works in a way like for those of you who work in corporate America and know how to set up, auto sending emails and auto replies to things. That's pretty much what the portal is, oh, hey, I'm the head coach at South Central Louisiana State University, and man, I'd really love to have you at the Bourbon Bowl next year. And it's a faceless email from an automated system. That seems to be what Hayden John is posting about.
Okay. So yeah, I can bring this up just because I've talked to other family members who've had kids in the portal at different sports. Is when you see anyone posting about someone they've heard from, this isn't just a Hayden John thing. This is anyone.
Yeah.
Posting about having heard from someone is essentially irrelevant because what will happen is when a player enters the portal, they will get a ton of initial messaging, like Dallas was saying. It's essentially automatic messaging sent by coaches and staffs. If those messages can make players feel like, oh man, like there's a ton of interest in my name. If those messages do not immediately translate into meetings, which then immediately translate into offers, then it means absolutely nothing. So obviously, like, hey, John played at Idaho. We wish him the best. We're not trying to highlight him in a negative way or something like that. But just FYI for listeners, process-wise, when you see on social media messages, postings about a player who's heard from school A, B, C, or D, it means absolutely nothing until someone has an offer and accepts an offer. It doesn't matter. We've also seen with guys like Caden Pinnock, who just accepted an offer to Washington State. It was in the news. He had an offer from Colorado. If guys have offers, if they don't say yes to them pretty quick, they're getting yanked almost instantly. So posting that, you have heard from a place without an offer, it means very, very little because coaches are not spending time leaving offers open to guys who are not going to say yes. Like their coaches are moving on right away.
Exactly. The transfer portal is open for 2 weeks and it's now once a year. So This is a rapidly changing thing. Nebraska had one of the biggest quarterback commits in the portal this year, and he flipped to Kentucky the day after he said he was going to sign with Nebraska. And then what happens? A day later, Nebraska's already got a new quarterback. Like if you're not getting your offer immediately, I mean, you're sitting there hoping for a gravy train that might not have any wheels. So, again, I wish Hayden John the best, and I wish the best to the thousands and thousands of players that enter the portal thinking the grass is greener, only to find out they never play football again. I wish the best of luck for those guys, and I'm sorry you had shitty advice when you probably needed it the most. But Brian, we're 40 minutes in. It's time to transition, like you said, because Martin's got some women's basketball updates for us. But first, if you are looking for a great all-inclusive week-long vacation, do not look past your backyard. Hughes River Expeditions has been vandal-owned and operated since 1976, and they're ready to take you on the vacation of a lifetime. Enjoy a multi-day trip down the Middle Fork of the Salmon, the main Salmon River of no return, the Salmon River Canyons, or even the Selway. And you could check out special trips like one to see the Perseid meteor shower, camp on pristine beaches, run amazing whitewater, hike scenic trails, spot wildlife, soak in beautiful natural hot springs, and as always, guys, fish the most remote stretches of river in the entire country. Just bring your clothes and HRE is going to handle everything else. Grab a paddle, catch dinner, and ride the bull all throughout the Gem State. Call them now, 406-540-4450. Again, that's 406-540-4450. Or check them out at hughesriver.com. Martin, it's time to go from the football to the round ball. You have an update for us on women's basketball.
Yeah, so last time we talked, I believe, was the week before, just week before Christmas, I believe. Idaho had a game against a sub D1 game against Western Oregon and beat them easily. Lost a game against Utah State and Cal, which I'm not too worried about those games just because they're out of conference. What matters now is what happened this past weekend, and they won against Eastern Washington 6-9, 6-3. Very nice game right there. They kind of led from wire to wire, but there were some sketchy moments, I'd say, with where kind of let Eastern back into it, but overall were pretty consistent with winning the game. Some notable things, Hope Hassman only had 10 points today, which is last Saturday, which was a little surprising, but given what we all know and expect from her, but nothing that not that I'm not surprised about that. It's the offense, the offense that Art Murr runs is very much like anybody can have a good game. Anybody can have a good game for them, and it shouldn't be surprising. Biggest surprise so far this season, I'd say, is Anna Pinheiro has taken a huge step forward from last year, from this freshman that got I wouldn't say was a role player last year, has been played into a starter role with Anya Bukovic not playing this year, being that she's, I believe, redshirting this year. She's been playing well. She's I think she's 6 foot, Arthur said, with a 6'4" arm reach or something like that. It's insane. It's for what she plays, it's really good. She had 15 points. The big noticeable difference is Kiera Gardner had another double-double, 11 points, 10 rebounds. She was a tough son of a gun this past Saturday. She got, I want to say punched because that's not what happened, but she took a couple strong fouls to the face and just her body in the fourth quarter, and she just toughed it out and came back and came out a little bit because bloody nose and obviously can't be bleeding on the court, but she was playing. She came back in and made some clutch plays when needed, and it's also just nice. I'll kind of jumping around again, but having multiple bigs that can come in when one gets in foul trouble is so nice. What I heard was kind of with Dos Santos kind of coming back from injury. She has been probably the most impressive 4 or 5 that I've seen Idaho have in a long time, since probably Nat Clinker. Sorry, Nat Clinker, or just in general. She is so good. It's amazing what happens when a team has depth and doesn't have to rely on 2 or 3 players. And they have just been, it's a very fun, entertaining basketball that they have going on. And they have 2 games coming up against Montana and Montana State, both as Art said in the press conference on yesterday, 2 different styles, 2 completely different styles. Montana really wants to from what he said, kind of really wants to open it up and shoot a ton of threes. And Montana State is very much a defensive game, and it's going to be really wants to trying to press you the entire game, press you up full court, and yeah, it's going to be just going to be a big weekend to see what it is. I think Montana State was picked preseason conference, and I want to say Montana was number 2 or I want to say number 2 and Idaho is number 3. I can't remember the exact thing, but a big week ahead for Idaho with for basketball on the women's side.
Yeah, the women's team right now, their NCAA net rating is 120 out of 363, which for a Big Sky team is pretty damn good. Montana State's going to be a test. They're sitting at 7-4 on the year. That's their D1 record, 7-4 on the year. Their net rating is 81. Montana State, who, by the way, the Montana State football team just won the FCS championship. For those who pay attention, you probably know that. Montana State has been absolutely humming in the top sports for both men and women of football, and then both basketball, men's and women's basketball. So the clash against Montana State, if you think Idaho has a chance to win the league, which I think Idaho has looked pretty goddamn good most games, that's a matchup to keep your eye on. The further thing that I'm going to be tracking with the women's team the entire season is how many minutes is Deborah Dos Santos able to play. There are 4 women on the Vandals right now, averaging more than 10 a game, 5 if you dip down to 8.5. With Hope Asman leads the team at 13.9. So that's the overall contribution offensively that Idaho gets is pretty damn stable. But per minute, Deborah Dos Santos is one of the most effective scorers in the entire Big Sky. She's playing 13.5 minutes a game, averaging just under 11 points a game and averaging just under 7.5 rebounds a game. That's incredible production. The question is going to be, can she get to a point that she's regularly on the floor for 25-ish minutes? If she can, that's an all Big Sky level player. But she's at Idaho because of those knee injuries, and I would be floored if Coach Moreira really wants her to be on the floor more than 25 minutes in any given game. But that's in addition, just tracking how the team itself does. I'm just paying attention to how many minutes is Dos Santos able to stay out there.
Yeah, last year she was 27 to 30 games last year, I think, Martin, and I think averaged a double in the WCC. So I know you're our correspondent here, but to me that looks like that's a hell of a talent right there. If they can figure out a way to manage those knees, she could be the key to the Vandal women's team making a run like they haven't made in close to a decade.
Yeah, the other thing I just mentioned, like right now with how they've been playing, with how they've been managing Deb's minutes right now, has been like, hey, Lorena gets in a foul, it's just throw Deb in there and just rotate them in and out just as they get a foul. Sometimes they give Lorena a little more minutes, I think, just because she's a little, I won't say more healthy is the right word to use, but just can go a little longer. But Lorena has, I'll just say it, Lorena has had some stupid fouls, and some stuff is on her for making some interesting plays. But again, that's just me. But Lorena, they are rotating her, getting Deb a lot of minutes. They are trying to rotate as much as possible, but it's, yeah.
Very quickly, before we transition to men's basketball, Jason Mayer leaving a comment in the comment section. I believe there are a couple sweet spots left for Starch Madness. Ping Tom Kendall if you want in on a Tubs at the Club suite. Our lovely Patreon and non-Patreon followers have all started banding together to get a suite for the Starch Madness at the Big Sky tournament in Boise. So if you're interested in seeing the Vandals, reach out to Tom Kendall. There might be some seats available.
If you don't know how to get a hold of Tom Kendall, get a hold of Tubbs. We'll point you in the right direction.
Perfect. I was going to throw his Twitter handle out there, Brian, but I like that idea better. So anyways, Brian, men's basketball update. What is the Pribble Dribble looking like?
The men's team, they're sitting at 9-5 on the year, 6-5 against D1 teams. And since we recorded, back around, before Christmas break, the men closed the out of conference season. They I'm not going to talk about the Evergreen game. Of course, Idaho beat the shit out of Evergreen. But the Vandals split 2 close road games. They beat Cal Poly at Cal Poly 83-80, and then lost at Cal State Bakersfield 64-63. Then, just like the women, opened Big Sky Conference play this last weekend, beat Eastern Washington 84-81 in a game that was a little bit odd. This meant the Idaho Vandals right now on the men's side, they are without Jack Payne and they are without Christian Gonzalez. Full disclosure, not to put down Jack Payne at all. His production this year has not been what it was last season. He's averaging 6-ish points a game, shooting under 37% from the field. Now, sometimes guys take a minute to get running, but last season Payne closed the year as one of the go-to scorers for Idaho, and that just has not been the case with this team. The story of this team, which I talked about on previous episodes, was Tyler Rasmussen's looking very good as a true freshman who had been leading the team in scoring. What Idaho needed was a little bit better production from the guards, to maybe take that next step. And one of the guards who has absolutely answered the bell has been Colton Mitchell over the last 3 games. Mitchell, who started the season out slowly. So if you look at per game averages for Mitchell, they're still they're not awful by any means. He leads the team in scoring at 14.9 points a game. Field goal percentage is at 39. So, a little bit under 40. That obviously you want to be better. But I'm focusing on the last 3 games. Colton Mitchell looks like he has figured something out for the Vandals the last few games where, he's put up against Eastern. He had his career high of 32 on 14 shot attempts. But in the Cal Poly and the CSU Bakersfield game, he put up 31 and 17. So over the last 3 games, Colton Mitchell's been carrying this team offensively, averaging just under 27 points per game. And he honestly, it's been fun to watch because he's still a point guard. He still has to run the offense and distribute the ball. But he has been able to be the go-to scorer for Idaho without being a ball stopper. He put up 14 shots to get to his 32 points against Eastern, and he's commonly made big buckets for Idaho. Now, kind of ironically, one of the biggest buckets for Idaho against Eastern came after Colton Mitchell had a 3 blocked right to Biko Johnson, and then Biko hit the 3 to give Idaho a late lead, which would be the final lead Idaho had, in picking up the W. But what we're looking at for the Vandals is their NCAA net rating is 130. Man, why did I lose that? Sorry, not 130. Vandals are 151. They've had a high of 130 on the year. 151 puts them at the number 5 NCAA net rated team in the Big Sky. But those 5 teams are clustered pretty close. The top is Montana State at 137. So between 137 and 151, I know this is just one analytical rating, but if you're trying to project out the conference, the top half of the Big Sky is all very close. So these 2 games Idaho has against Montana on Thursday and Montana State on Saturday are pretty damn close to, in my mind, must win because Idaho looks like a team that they need to be finishing in that top half of the conference. There's too much talent on Idaho to not be there. When things are clicking for the Vandals, to me, they are increasingly getting better at not relying on threes first, but on putting pressure on the defense first, which will then get you threes. We know they're going to shoot threes. There's no complaint for me. But when you see this team get complacent, it's you'll just see the ball isn't getting into the key either on post-ups or dribble penetration, and it stays around the perimeter. That sometimes kind of happens when Idaho won, when it looks like Idaho a few games when they see the finish line with a lead, you can just see there's a little bit of let up. That's part of why the Eastern game was as close as it was. Idaho led by double figures in the second half and had to actually come back to pick up the W. But as against a team like Montana, where the big concern with Montana is Money Williams. He's averaging over 18 a game. He is easily the top threat for Montana. The next leading scorer for the Grizzlies is Tajon Sawyer at just over 10 points a game. So realistically, Montana goes as Money Williams goes. Montana State's a little bit different. Their offensive identity is closer to Idaho in that they have Montana State's got 4 guys averaging double figures. The Vandals have 3 guys averaging double figures. If Christian Gonzalez is able to come back, that'll for sure be a 4th. But there's not a single guy on Montana State that you're looking to stop. They're a solid team where their leading score is averaging about 14 points per game. For these 2 games for Idaho, I consider this Dallas essentially must win, because this is one of the Vandals. This is a team that feels like this is the year they can make a move. The first couple years with Pribble, each year they're a little bit better version than they had been the year before, but he's had roster continuity and he has clear leaders on this team right now. Colton Mitchell's obviously one of them. Brody Robree is the transferred center, has been a big deal for the Vandals too. So against Montana, what I'm looking at is, can Colton Mitchell continue to be the go-to shot maker for this team? Because if he can do that, that's answered a ton of questions for Idaho these last 3 games with Colton Mitchell playing at a first team all Big Sky level the last 3 games. That just changes who Idaho is dramatically. Second, we got, I know I said Tyler, it's Jackson Rasmussen. Jackson Rasmussen had been the leading scorer for Idaho for most of the season so far. He's still second leading scorer, just under 14 points a game. Eastern Washington made shutting down Rasmussen a clear point of emphasis. And I'm not going to say Rasmussen was like completely shut down against the Eagles, but he was just not a difference maker against Eastern the way he has been for Idaho for many games. He credit Rasmussen against Eastern. He didn't have a lot of opportunities, but he did not force any. But, he scored 7 points, one of his lower outputs. But the last 3 games, Rasmussen has not broken double figures. It does seem like teams have figured out that Rasmussen's a guy to focus on to try to eliminate Idaho getting points in the paint. This is the learning curve of a true freshman. Now he's not going to sneak up on guys anymore. So will Rasmussen find another way to contribute? That's the other thing that I'm paying attention to. Last but not least, I'm not trying to get too far ahead of myself with how to project this Idaho team, where they should be in the conference tournament. But this far, with how this team at times can look pretty damn good, and look, hey, they're up and down. That's what happens when you're the 3rd or 4th best team in a 1-bid league. You're going to be up and down for sure. This is a team that, to me, this has to be a top 3 or 4 seed. There's just no way around it with the returning talent. Some of the guys are going to be graduating. Pribble's in year 3. Whatever culture Pribble wants to establish so far, it's there. And we've seen Idaho take a huge step forward in defensive rebounding this year, which is a night and day difference compared to last season. But if Idaho's going to be a 3 or 4 seed, they got to be tough to beat at home. Vandals are undefeated at ICCU, but there's only 2 D1 games in, sitting 5-0 at ICCU. So these 2 games, to me, huge deal, albeit probably both of them for sure. I'll be at the Thursday game, guys. So if you're there, say hi. I'll do my best to make it there Saturday. But Dallas, that's your men's basketball update. Anything you want to add?
Yeah. So Brian, obviously, Jackson Rasmussen is one of the bigger prospects that have come to Idaho in a long time. One of the more touted guys that's come to Idaho. Still leads the team in minutes played. Second in points per game now. But as James Jacobs says in the comments, love Ras, but he's definitely struggling with turning over the ball. He is leading the team in turnovers by 1 over Biko Johnson. Biko, obviously being a guard, has a ton of assists and steals to help offset that turnover number. Rasmussen does,
and just has the ball in his hand a lot more too.
Yeah, there's I meant it was positive plays to fix that, but yes, outside of the turnover issue that Rasmussen has had, and again the little bit of slip back here as we get closer to and start Big Sky play. But what do you expect to see out of him the rest of the year? I know that for the casual basketball fan, much like myself, Jackson Rasmussen is kind of the name of like, oh yeah, that guy was supposed to be really good. What do you think is going to look like his output in the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks as Idaho builds towards, like you said, hoping to get one of those top 4 seeds?
It's a little hard to project because Idaho, with a couple key contributors out for a while, again, as referenced, Christian Gonzalez still out, still in a boot. He's projected. Gonzalez is expected to make it back this year. And then Jack Payne has been out for a couple of games too. No exact timetable, but that is common in Big Sky sports to have no actual injury timeline updates. But with two guys like that out, that changes the dynamic of who Idaho is, and it shortens Idaho's bench quite a bit. So the thing that I guess that I'm looking at with Rasmussen is he's going to see a lot more double teams when he gets the ball in the post, and we saw that with Eastern. We're also going to see teams just being, when he's down low, being overtly physical with him in a way that it wasn't quite the same. So one of the promising things about Rasmussen is I think he's good at not forcing up shots. So, if he's in the post getting doubled, now this is where he gets better turnovers. He's got to start anticipating that the doubles are coming. But if he's doubled, someone is open on the perimeter. So Rasmussen is still going to be a key component to Idaho, even if his average dips down to he's been averaging around 14. If his average dips down to around 10, that's fine. Like I don't care, so long as he's still being aggressive and the double teams are giving other guys open shots. If you were templating, what to look for from Idaho basketball right now out of the guard play, minus Colton Mitchell these last 3 games, the wings have been inconsistent. That's why Idaho sits at 6-5 in D1 play with some of their games being close. If Idaho had a little bit more consistency out of, Jack Payne's there. Pico Johnson's had some very good games, but he's shooting sub 40% on the year too. Colton Mitchell, as brought up earlier, in spite of just kicking ass these last 3 games, he's still shooting under 40% on the season. That lets you know that across this entire season, that guard play has been up and down. Having a guy like Rasmussen, one, to put up points, but also help get those guys easier shots is key. So I guess what I care about more than how many points a game the guy's averaging is, 1, is he staying aggressive? And 2, is he becoming more intuitive about feeling or even playing into the double team so he can then pass out to guys open on the perimeter? Because those are the type of threes that even old school basketball fans want to see. A guy has his feet set at the 3-point line, kick out. An open kick out is one of the easiest catch and shoot shots that a wing can get in college basketball. And you get those from either a guard who's able to penetrate and sink the defense or a post commanding a double team. At this point, that's how Eastern attacked Rasmussen. Credit to him for not forcing up a ton of bad shots. He clearly is judicious with his understanding of what he needs to do offensively. But it's important for his development to really see how he reacts now. Because as a true freshman, he's very well developed physically, for a true freshman in the Big Sky. I think a ton of Vandals saw him the first, 6-7 games, like, okay, enjoy him right now. He's going to be here for a year.
Yep.
I think he's at the level he needs to be at for at least one more year. And I think, the development that he's going to look at that will either turn him into an all Big Sky player or get him some money at a bigger conference is he now needs to be able to deliver when he's not catching teams by surprise or when he knows a double team's coming. Maybe that means making your move before it gets there or waiting for the double team to get there to get the assist.
Thank you, Brian, for the extremely well said comments on Rasmussen. I got to be honest, I heard you say penetrate and then I forgot all of it. I just started thinking about penetration. So anyways, that means we are officially well over the hour mark and we have crossed into Tubbs After Dark. As we said earlier, the men are at home, Montana Thursday, Montana State Saturday in the ICCU arena. Women are obviously on the road to Montana and Montana State before Idaho State, Weber State in the week afterwards. The transfer portal is open until January 16th, so we have 10 more days from show air to find out who's going to be leaving, who's going to be joining, and then we will obviously jump back in and bring you all of that as soon as we have more news to discuss. But we will be back soon with more news about the football coaches, football transfer portal. The basketball seasons have just begun Big Sky play for all of us here at Tubbs with the Club. Go Vandals.
Go Vandals.
This is producer Brian doing a terrible job of even finding what we're going to play us out with. So we're just going to call it good. See you guys Tuesday.